Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from a very steamy and warm Brooklyn. On the West Coast is my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hopefully it's a little less stifling where you are right now. How is it going out there?
Dry as a bone. Can't say we're steamy at all. So.
Oh, yeah. I think it's honestly just because this is sort of the last weekend was extraordinarily rainy. You know, Memorial Day weekend typically kicks off the summertime vibes, but it wasn't feeling that way, and this is definitely full on summertime. And what that means is that at least here, everybody is like out in the streets, eating, drinking, walking, rejoicing, fainting in the heat. But it was sort of like full on, you know, I wouldn't say it's like insane, but just full on summertime immediately. So I think it's just seems that people are having a difficult time adjusting, but they seem to be trying to embrace it with some fanfare anyway. So
yeah.
And you know, it's kind of like I don't know. Things are just opening up wildly here, and it's interesting. I don't know if you've been experiencing this or seeing this, but there's like this weird, I mean, there's an anxiety because things are opening up so quickly, but people are really excited. So it's kind of an interesting spread of emotions, I would say. Spectrum of emotions.
Conflicting feelings. Like, I really want to go to a barbecue, but also, shoot, I don't really feel super comfortable here with all these people.
Right. Yeah. But we are going to talk about a couple of little tidbits of news, but then we are going to talk about Slither, which is, it was filmed in 2006, correct?
It was released in 2006.
Sorry, released in 2006. And this is James Gunn, a directorial debut, and at least on the sort of the big scene. And I will say, I was raising some protests about this, and I stand by some of the, you know, parts that were really grossed me out. But I thoroughly enjoyed watching this. I'll leave some of my comments for later. But I will say, it is surprising to me that this wasn't a bigger hit when it came out, because it actually is a pretty good film. It's fun. And it wasn't the film that I thought it was. I think I was confusing this with some cross in my mind with like snakes on a plane and something else. So I definitely don't think this was what I thought. This was definitely not the film I thought it was when we started talking about watching it. So my bad. But in any case, I'm looking forward to chatting about that with you. But before we get to that, let's talk about a couple of the little things that were out there. Not too much today. The news feeds are still taken over by a bit of the Army of the Dead type news. But and speaking of, there's this little like YouTube thing, Guzman of the Dead, or Guzman of the Dead.
Guzman, yeah, Guzman. Starring Raul Castillo, who played Guzman in the movie, and he's playing the same character.
Yep.
And it's actually, one of the clips is from the video that Maria was showing Scott Ward when they were out recruiting him, where he's getting his multiple headshots.
Yep.
It's fun. It's like it's a total extra in the spirit of like the sorts of extras you would get on Blu-rays from Dawn of the Dead or movies like that back in the day. Also, I just saw today that, or maybe it didn't release today, but I saw it today. Season 10 of Walking Dead is getting a full release on Blu-ray, and I'm just like, what? I mean, I guess they must still sell some of those, but I haven't bought a DVD, and actually, that's not true. I buy them only now to play in our minivan when we go on road trips, so it's just like Finding Nemo and stuff.
I don't think I have a way to play DVDs anymore, so, so interesting. You'll have to let us know what the kids think of season 10, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna put that on. For sure.
But yeah, I don't know about that. But in any case, you know, I thought that was kind of a fun little extra to have on there. And I do
Oh,
think
it's
that,
super fun, and it's like four different little scenes.
yeah,
It's a pretty cool extra. Yeah.
yeah, and look, I think that again, Zack Snyder had a lot of fun with this. I think that they have a lot of little extras. They're putting out other things related to this movie, so it's the full treatment, I would say. And I don't blame them. I mean, I kind of think the more stuff you get out there, the more people will eventually watch. But yeah, so that's definitely a fun thing to catch if you haven't yet. The next, there was another couple of articles. One is the 10 best zombie movie needle drops, and I agree with some of these on here. This is basically like the soundtracks of the different zombie films that came out, and there's definitely some like I feel like Shaun of the Dead was certainly that was immediately the song that came to mind for me. But there's also like a bunch of others in there.
Shaun of the
Where
Dead is probably the most, well, for me, it's the most memorable track too, because
right,
it was a dance number. It was like a
right,
choreographed
and it's a
dance number.
choreographed. It was just funny.
Yeah.
And I do think that with some of these, you know, oh, and Dawn of the Dead, Down with the Sickness, that was definitely
Yeah, I don't remember
prominent.
where that was in the soundtrack,
Wasn't that the
because
beginning?
that movie opened with, no, that opened with Johnny Cash.
Oh, you're right. And that actually is more what I would associate with this.
When the Man Comes
Yeah,
Around, I think
yeah,
is the
that
song.
was, and in fact, that
Yeah, and
was a
that
really,
was and super disturbing. Like that cemented Johnny Cash as like the zombie troubadour in my
yeah,
head
yeah,
forever because of how disturbing that, plus the images that they were playing, right?
yeah. No,
I
no,
don't
you're totally
remember
right.
the Down with the Sickness
Oh, Down with the
part.
Sickness, I think, is later.
They had a lot of montages, so I don't know if they
Yeah,
like
there
put
were
it in one of their
several.
montages or if it was in an action sequence, but
And, I think that this is all on point because I do think that watching Slither, James Gunn has a great soundtrack to this film that definitely went along with it. Some of it's very tongue in cheek, but he has impeccable taste or he has people who have impeccable taste, and we've seen that with Guardians of the Galaxy and other things. So it was definitely on point. So I thought that was kind of a fun little article. And yeah, I don't know how I feel about this next item, Stuart, because it's the reanimated web series, and we've been
it's
around a
not us.
while. I know it's not us, but it's weird. I did try to find this, and I was not able to, so I will have to try to see if I can
Oh,
find a link to it.
yeah. Well, because the YouTube channel is Evil Genius
Right,
Entertainment.
right.
And then
So
you can click through and find some of their reanimated web series, and it's zombie shorts with amateur actors. It's super low
yeah,
budget. It's it's okay.
yeah. So kind of, I'll have to check that out. I just didn't have time to go through it. And last up is just a silly little. It was from the comic book resources, and it's the comic heroes that would survive a zombie apocalypse and those that wouldn't. And this is specifically DC superheroes. So basically, it's like the Green Lantern and Superman would obviously survive. I think they put Wonder Woman in this category because of their amazing superpowers, but people like, say, Batman would not. And I think they also have the Flash in that category because they say he's too good-hearted, so he would succumb to, he'd be like basically too worried about people and not really understand that they were taken over yet by some kind of zombie plague, and want to help. So his vulnerability makes him a easy target for zombocalypse, I guess. But I just
Some of
thought it
these
was,
guys I've never even heard of. Who's Booster Gold?
yeah.
Maybe I just don't know my
They
DC.
did some deep cuts here. So anyway,
It's basically anybody who's a B team, mostly human, dies. Like Hawkman, the
right.
Green Arrow, so they're Marvel. Wait, they're saying the Flash wouldn't survive? Come on,
Yeah, they're saying that no, but they're more saying it's because he's just always wants to help, and so that
he'll be trying to help people and end up
right.
getting bitten. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, me too. I think he'd be able to flash away, right?
Yeah,
But in any case, that's just kind of a fun, silly little thing.
totally.
So on to our big showcase of this show. which is Slither. And as we mentioned, it's the directorial debut of James Gunn. And James Gunn, most people probably know him more now from Guardians of the Galaxy and that franchise. And there was the controversy that happened with him and his tweets in 2018. So Disney very famously fired him as these tweets came to light. And these were tweets that he had put up, honestly, before even I think this happened, possibly. And they were, quite frankly, some pretty inappropriate, off-color, dark jokes.
No, they were. He wrote them after this movie.
Oh, did he? Okay, sorry, I misread the article about it because I wanted to remind myself. So I guess I didn't get that right. But in any case, it looked. He basically said, I was looking to do things for shock value. I am very sorry for having done them, and that was sort of what he said at the time, and Disney fired him. But then there was such a backlash over this that they then rehired him in 2019. That said, there was a couple of there was a horror film release. Was it? I want to say Brightburn or Burn Bright or something like that. And they basically that just was swept under the rug. And he, but they brought him back, and I think that it's one of those things where you have to talk about cancel culture, and whether somebody can be redeemed. And I don't think he made, to me, he did not make one of those, I apologize if I offended anyone. He basically threw himself out there and said, look, I did offend people and it was wrong to do this. So, I think he handled it probably the best way you possibly could. And so he has been, reinstated since that time, basically, by Disney.
And based on all the support from the cast of his films, there were
Right.
there were some joint statements released.
Right. So in any case, this was
But this predates all of that.
Yeah.
Even before he had those bad ideas to write those
I guess.
stupid things on Twitter that then came back to haunt him. And did you enjoy his cameo in this film?
I did. And his brother is what is his name? His brother is very had a pretty big role in Gilmore Girls as sort of this general, I know he started out kind of as an extra, but he basically also has a cameo, not a cameo, but a small part in Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's kind of funny. Do you know his brother?
Sean Fisher, yeah, and he's he's one of the people on the
Sorry,
crew
Sean Gunn. Sean Gunn.
Did I say Sean Fisher?
Yeah.
Sean Gunn.
Although
this
did
dude was with Pam from The Office during this time when he was making this movie. It sounds like they were married and got separated in 2007.
Yeah, so
that's.
Wonder.
I mean, there she is. What's her name? Not Pam Fisher.
Shelby,
Jennifer Fisher.
Jennifer Fisher, and she plays Shelby in this. But I think James Gunn has made several cameos. I think this isn't the first time, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, it might be. I mean, this was one of his first movies, or not really. This is. I'm looking at his.
He's had, as I said, this is the first sort of big stage directorial debut, but he had.
He wrote Tromeo and Juliet, or he was a writer on that project. And I guess one of the guys from Troma has a cameo in this film too. So there's I think it might be in the wiki. There's a list of all the people who have cameos, and there's a ton of people actually. This honestly, this project has a great cast. Beyond the cameos, just the four main cast members: Elizabeth Banks, Nathan Fillion, Michael Rooker. And I would say Greg Henry rather than Tanya Saulnier, even though she is a major character. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't take her or leave it. But Greg Henry is the mayor. Jack McCready is just...
He's great.
Those four people make this movie as good as it is.
And I will point out that a lot of these people have roles in his later films, and Guardians is one of them, and that includes Nathan Fillion. As well as Michael Rooker and so that's kind of I don't know. I think it's kind of fun.
What has Nathan Fillion done subsequently with Gunn?
Well, he was one of the. Well, you didn't see him as himself. He was one of the prisoners in Guardians, in the jail.
He's like an alien or something.
Yeah, like he was like one of the big aliens that attacks Star Lord. So
Okay.
it's pretty quick cameo, but it's still there, and so he's got so he definitely brings back people that he likes, like into his other films.
That's cool.
So that's kind of fun. And I will say, like, Michael Rooker is somebody that obviously we love him from Walking Dead. He was in Guardians. And he really plays this very specific, like, I think it's fair to say that he gets typecast a lot because I do think he probably has more range than
Oh, has
this.
he ever played a good guy in his life?
I feel like there's one or two roles where he's actually an okay guy, but there's always like a darker side to him. Like he accesses that sort of negative
Oh yeah.
side of things, and I think this goes back to there was like a film about it was like Portrait of a serial killer or something like that. That's one of his roles that was apparently so controversial. They had to wait a few years to release it because it was pretty dark. And basically, that's kind of where he's been ever since. But he has that. He's got that like scratchy voice. He's got that imposing presence. He's just
Yeah.
got that, whatever that is, he plays this villainous role really well. And in this
I
case, I
think
mean,
he can be so effortlessly threatening. Like he doesn't
yeah,
have to
he's
really do
imposing.
much. Yeah.
He's definitely imposing. And I think that this is no exception, but I think that there's a little bit, you can have a little bit more sympathy for him in this than maybe in some other things because there's lots of stuff going on in this film and there's a little subtext here too, I think. But he still is sort of, I don't want to say douchey, but he's sort of like, you know,
Well,
dickish.
okay. His name
Dickish.
is Grant in
I
this
know.
movie, and he is married to Elizabeth Banks's character, Starla, and like his love for her is a major push in the story, right?
Right.
Like that's a huge element, but he's also like possessive and demanding of her, and there's a lot of yeah, it's like it's actually pretty nuanced. Like he's not entirely terrible, but he's definitely he's not a sympathetic character, even though he is a faithful spouse for the most part, other than a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of like an emotional uh he almost cheats on his wife in the first act, but he actually doesn't, and he still
Right.
pays the
Still pays the price for
pays
even
the
being
price.
tempted.
Yeah.
But also, I think that the other part of this is that look, and it's like I have to say, again, I take back like the fact that I thought that this was about snakes, um, but
I thought you said worms last week. I think you knew what you were
worms
getting into.
worms or snakes, but I didn't. I guess for some reason I thought that this was so, like, even when I started watching, I'm like, oh, this is a very different film than. I'll have to figure out which film I thought it was, but it definitely wasn't this one. But in any case, he like the way that the storytelling happens in this film, it is very much an homage to older horror films.
Yeah.
There's some really
I,
good
I mean,
things
it's
that they
so
do.
homagey that people got pretty pissed off about it, right?
Yes,
And the
yeah.
critical response when it first came out, people were like, "Ah, this is a ripoff of the 1970 blah blah."
Yeah.
Like
Well, I mean,
people
it's got so much in it. I mean, it's got Toxic Avenger,
yeah,
definitely,
it's got
absolutely.
major trauma DNA,
Oh,
like
yeah. It's got
obviously.
so much in this, but I kind of like I liked this, but again, and I feel like Zack Snyder's getting a bit of this with Army of the Dead because people are really getting like worked up about the alien homage thing, and it's not like it's hidden. And I feel like that's the same thing here. It's pretty clear where these things are coming from, and I don't think it's meant to be. I mean, it's a black comedy, so I don't think it's meant to be like taken that seriously. It's people are supposed to have fun with it, and I think people just lose their sense of humor about it. And so I have no issue with the fact that they're homaging all over the place here, basically.
Homaging all over the
It's
place
true. It's
for
true.
sure.
But what I was going to say is that with the storytelling in this, the things that you learn about this Grant character and his relationship with Starla, with both of them, it's a really interesting thing because you see their interactions together you see them separately, and then you hear, how other people in the town view them. And there is this whole sort of narrative that they build, but not just through what you see with the two characters. It's with it's basically a
Couple.
360-degree view of their relationship, which I think is pretty, honestly, pretty deep for a pretty
Yeah.
silly horror film, dark
And tough
comedy.
to do in the short amount of time
Right.
before
And they
things
do
get
it.
really horror-y.
And
Yeah.
they do it in very, very little moments and just comments. And I thought that was excellent, quite frankly. And the thing I'm talking about is that, so Starla is with Grant. They are definitely a December May kind of romance. He's clearly a lot older than her. And then there's a lot of commentary about the fact, why she ends up with him. And she's not, I wouldn't say she's reluctant to be with him, but she's definitely having some moments because maybe life isn't what she thought it would be. And he is a bit overbearing and clearly jealous. The whole James Gunn cameo where he's like what is he
He's
he's
talking about like houses in Cambodia
right.
to Starla, and then Grant's just like, yeah. Or wait, no. Starla's like, oh, he wants to. I'm gonna lend him a lesson plan, and Grant's like, that's not what he wants to borrow, and I'm not lending, or
Yeah,
something along those
something
lines.
a really good, delivered in only the Michael Rooker way. um, but and that feels very, paternalistic. He's overbearing and
And by
just
comparison, like Starla is just sweet, unassuming, humble. She's a primary school or a high school teacher
yeah, those
or
poor
whatever,
kids. I
and
mean, and even those scenes, the kids are clearly exactly what you would expect high school
yeah.
boys to react when they have a teacher that looks like Elizabeth Banks in the classroom.
And one of
Just
the other people in that classroom is Kylie, who
yep,
becomes a major character later, although I didn't recognize her because, frankly,
yep.
that actor's presence is a little bit bland,
It
I
is,
find.
it is, but still, that was kind of the way that they set this up, and the way they set up how these characters are perceived was pretty, just to me, excellent. So, but we have Starlo with Grant, and he's overbearing and definitely possessive and a little, but as I said, there's some sympathy, but there's also clearly something going on between them because something that's not right because she basically is like, I'm not in the mood, and this sort of sets off the whole path where we see this film go.
But the next
Um,
day, I don't like, not to get too much into weird like marital dynamics, but the next morning she is eager to make up for that.
Well, I think she feels guilty and bad.
Yeah.
And I definitely, it's not that she doesn't care about him because I think she does. But, you can kind of, you know that there's something that's clearly going on with them. And this plays out through the entire storyline. And things are complicated like that. And again, it's, as I said, it's more complex than a horror film like this has any right to be. And typically, most films don't explore this kind of thing, which I think the subtext throughout the film, but also in these moments is honestly great, and it's what makes this a fantastic film. So despite the fact that it got panned when it was first released, I am really happy that it's gotten a cult following because it totally deserves it. And it's honestly a great bit of filmmaking and editing. This is just, I don't know that there's much about this that I would change, other than the thing that you just mentioned in terms of Kylie's character. I felt like I agree with you on that point, but
That's a
it's
pretty small
yeah,
gripe,
but
and
it's got the great, and it's got a fantastic cast.
oh God, those Greg Henry scenes
Oh,
of
so
Jack
good.
McCready, like what his introductory scene where he's cursing, cursing out the
Oh
traffic, and
gosh.
the lady's like, "Good morning, Mayor."
Oh, it's so good. And I feel like the wardrobe, the great way that the shots are set up, even the way that they set up this town, you really get this. They really set the table for the place that this is happening.
Mm.
It's this little town. You even know so much about the environment of this film without saying anything. There's the whole opening where it's the town is definitely not in the best place. It's got a pretty the economics of this town. It's not there are things that are broken down,
Yeah,
the mayor
boarded up.
included,
Yeah.
and but it's really just, and it again, it's kind of tropey because there's like, they kind of exaggerate things a little bit, but and then there's the whole thing where it's like, well, how are these people, honestly, if you look at the way they set up the some of the townspeople in these opening shots, it's like, how much different are they from normal zombies? And I think that's deliberate.
Mm.
And it's also the little things that this town is celebrating, like the whole fact that they all get together to celebrate deer hunting season is pretty hilarious. And that whole scene cut into the scene with Grant and Brenda, like was really screwed up, but also very, I don't want to say funny, but it was like just the stuff with the mayor and everything was fantastic. So I don't know. Like, I feel like the way that this was done was really a great editing. I don't know even what you want to call it, but I just thought it was, especially compared to other things that we have watched, this is definitely an example of how you do it right.
It shows a certain level of like sophistication in terms of editing a story together and doing two parallel storylines that are working together and at odds with each other. Yeah, it's I feel like it definitely shows that James Gunn was ready for the big leagues, or more ready than he had any right to be in 2006.
And one of the things I noticed, because I looked up some of the when they were making the film, and apparently Nathan Fillion was like he wasn't quite sure where they were drawing the line between like comedy and the horror part of it. So basically, James Gunn told him, well, there are funny parts of it, but it's not a comedy. And so that was, he wanted to figure out the tonal shift. And I think that that's the balance that they strike. There are definitely moments, and that's what I mean when I say it's hard. It's not funny per se, but it's clearly comic. Some of the
Yeah, well,
things that
Nathan
they.
Fillion is bringing big Mal Reynolds energy to
Oh,
this role.
definitely, absolutely. I mean, come on, this is who he like. I don't know
Maybe
if you
that's just that. Maybe that's his gear that he's in all the time. I don't
I don't
know.
know if you've ever like, he really loved the Mal Reynolds role, and I think he
Yeah,
brings that to a lot of things he does. And one of the things he said that is his favorite his favorite Halloween costume or something was a space cowboy. So I think that's there's strong Mal Reynolds in a lot of the stuff that he does. So that's not shocking here, and that's definitely he's bringing that sort of tropey cop. That's who he's channeling. I think I agree
yeah.
with you on that.
And like when after the barn scene, Elizabeth Banks or Starla is saying, "Be careful," and he shoots back some sort of like, "Yeah, that'll be right," or something along those. And I'm just like, it's like he's talking to the hooker on his
Yep,
spaceship again. Oh, you're
totally.
getting strong Firefly vibes.
Oh yeah,
And this was only a couple years after, or maybe the same year that Serenity came out.
yeah.
So I think he must have been performing as Malcolm Reynolds very recently while he was shooting this,
Yeah.
or at least he was getting ready to. But yeah, so Nathan Fillion, I mean, I love him in everything, so it was hard for me not to just be like, yeah, here we go, let's go, Nathan Fillion. And like the supporting cast, a lot of them don't get much room to work, but they do fine, right? Like the Strutmeyer family. The most disturbing thing about that situation is how casually this movie basically kills everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get infected, I was convinced all the way through watching that, well, not all the way, but once those two little girls get infected, I was convinced that James Gunn was going to find a way to cure everybody. But at the end of the movie, it just looks like everybody who got a worm in the face is dead. So I found that to be like kind of I mean, maybe it's a trauma thing, or maybe it's just like a casual horror thing, and James Gunn is like, whatever, let's kill these little girls. I was surprised by that. I did not expect everybody to be dead at the end of the movie, and I don't mean like the central cast. I mean anybody who was infected. I was convinced there was going to be a way to get out of jail free.
Yeah, I don't know, because he also, I mean, and we should have probably touched on this before, but he wrote the Dawn of the Dead remake.
Right? Yeah.
So, like, I think that it didn't shock me that he was willing to sacrifice everybody. It seemed like I kind of thought that that would be the way it was going to go. And I did look this up because I was like, how is he thinking about it in terms of the infection? And basically how he explains it is that, and Kylie managed to not get infected because she killed the worm that was trying to make its way before it like had basically put its grips into her. She had enough
Yeah.
of a flash so that it shows the audience a little bit of what's happening and gives her that insight. But
Yeah.
she's the only one that actually almost gets a worm down the throat that we see survive, right?
Yeah. Right. Everybody
But
else.
basically, as apparently as James Gunn describes it, once you get the worm, like you're actually dead, so you don't have any. It's the worm kind of supporting you. So even with Grant, even though he's sort of retaining, people retain or can sort of talk about their own memories and things like that. Physically, they are not able to stay alive if the worm goes away. So that's kind of where he was coming from, is that it was just very much this parasitic infection that totally takes over entirely, and that once, you know, the main thing dies, everybody dies. So I wasn't totally shocked by that.
But
But
still, it was just that struck me. That was like a horror tragedy moment. Obviously, you've got a bathtub scene, so right away
oh
you're set up
god,
for
I know.
disaster.
Stressful, the most
But
vulnerable thing, and then you see that thing in the water. It was really creepy.
that's
But
that's your like Jamie Lee Curtis moment of the film where Kylie is in the house and the worms are taking over her family and she's trying to save her little sisters. And that is honestly like there's no comedy in this
no,
part
no,
of the
it's
movie
really
at all.
upset. Yeah.
So that I did find affecting, but I was holding out hope until the end, until like the last scene. I was holding out hope that those girls would pop up and be like, "Oh, I had a tummy ache, but now I feel better," or something, you know. But too bad, so sad. No bueno.
And then the other, you know, I did like how they showed that this was basically, you know, a hive mind. And I do think that Michael Rooker's distinctive way of talking made that a lot more fun.
Yeah, that's another prop for the supporting cast who were able to
Yeah,
like, if they weren't delivering lines like him, they were at least I don't know, chanting in a way that made you think of Grant right away.
right. But especially the scene with Wally, who's the, you know, the unfortunate second in command to Nathan Fillion's like chief.
Hmm.
He does a really great job of a Michael Rooker imitation.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good. And it isn't just that they're using his little catchphrases, which they did very cleverly use enough in the beginning that you got that this was Michael Rooker, like killer or sugar plum or like whatever it was that he was calling, you know, different people. So I thought that that was also a nice little added bonus that they to show the hive sort of structure of this alien invasion. But let's see what else there
What do you
was.
think of the creature effects?
You know, I thought that they were good. I did think that some of the, and it, again, not deliberately funny, but like kind of is like the transformation of Grant Michael Rooker into this alien or something that's taking over his body. But specifically, Starla / Elizabeth Banks' reactions to it and other people's reactions to it are pretty awesome. Like, you know, in the beginning, you know, when he's first sort of being affected by this and he's like, oh, I was stung by a bee, but her face is just incredible. And then that's not even, you know, they kind of just up the ante. And I thought that whoever was doing the makeup did a really good job. And this was very much Toxic Avenger homage.
Oh yeah.
His whole being, especially towards the end, where he's just sort of mutated and kind of, you know, piling out of his own body. They do a little bit of this with Men in Black too, but not quite to the same effect. But because this is just so drastic and disgusting. A little bit of Jabba the Hutt, a little bit of Jabba the Hutt
Yeah.
too. And I thought that, you know, I think that they used it just enough, and it's cheesy enough that you're like, okay. I feel like they use CGI, but they used it in the right way, and I think that they use practical effects enough in the right
Hmm.
way to strike the right balance in this whole thing.
Yeah, I think the CG was not super jarring. Obviously, all the slugs were probably CG, except for
Yeah,
when once in a while they maybe had a prosthetic.
right.
But in the Michael Rooker stuff, like the posse scene where they find him with the cow, like at first he's like looking all stiff and doesn't move very well, but then there's the attack where he cuts one of the posse guys right in half, which is an amazing scene, and then slithers away super fast, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh wow, there's okay. So they're, I like the way that they came at this, and Brenda, the Brenda reveal in the barn where she has grown rather large right before all the worms come out.
Yep.
I thought that there were a lot of great monster effects in this, and they toyed with the idea of the hentai tentacle monster stuff, then did not go there. So I was also grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And apparently the woman who plays Brenda, like that, this was one of the challenges, but apparently she doesn't like meat and she's also claustrophobic. So all the effects, like where she's like kind of has to be like wrapped in this thing, like it was really upsetting to her. Plus the ones where she has to like, so apparently this was a pretty hard shoot for that actor.
Poor woman.
Yeah, I know, pretty rough. Brenda James is the name of the actor who plays her. And I want to also mention, I don't know if you noted this, and it was in the credits, but the kids with the twins, they're both reading some like a Goosebumps story, which I think is kind of fun. And they have like that was sort of a nice little Easter egg in there because those were stories that. I think those were a little bit after my time, but my younger brother, really loved those stories. So it was just kind of a fun little callback. But, this was, I don't know. I feel like also just even the setups for this film with the different relationships between Wally and Bill, they, from the get-go, it's like that kind of setup where they're sitting in the car, waiting like with a speed trap and that kind of thing. And you get to just, they basically follow the story of the meteor being the origin of this whole thing. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And, and then the very end, of course, they did have the possibility, I think, for a sequel, but that never happened. So
Yeah. That didn't need to happen.
I
The cat
agree.
thing. Because in theory, why would all the zombies have fallen down if they
Right.
hadn't
If it
destroyed
was still
the
alive,
host?
right?
So that would be my thinking on that. So you mentioned the music earlier when we were talking about the news, and there is one song that gets played a couple times, like "I'm Every Woman." No, it's not "I'm Every Woman." It's some country song that gets played a few times. Was that the main musical element that you were?
Oh, you mean the Air Supply song that they play, Starla
Is it?
and
There's yeah,
Grant's Love?
a couple times it comes back. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's the big song that they use. But it's also the use of like country songs in general. I thought
yeah,
that he did a pretty good job at splicing this in there. So but the use of the Air Supply soundtrack was really kind of hilarious.
Every Woman in the World.
Everyone
That's
in the
right.
world, yeah. And there's also just at the very end there's one by Old 97s, but that's over the credits, which I thought was great. But it's just like he does a good job at splicing things in. Like the country music was excellent, that they put in like with the bar scene and other stuff. So I thought that was pretty good. And also the fact that Air Supply song would be their song is pretty funny and I think speaks to the how Michael Rooker is a bit older than Starla, and makes it a little cheesier. So there's that too. And I have to, even the interactions between Starla, Elizabeth Banks, and Michael Rooker, like as it progresses, their interactions, like I feel like one of the best scenes is when they don't, the whole thing where they're doing the squid hunt for him, like the last thing all of these people have seen, when he attacks Starla and the cops come in and they were like, oh my gosh, he's got like a squid arm, and that's all they know about him.
Yeah,
And then they do this whole ambush on the farm, and when he makes his appearance, all of their reactions are phenomenal, and also the makeup and the fact that he's evolved into this. What a great lead up and what a great reveal, and the fact that they're just horrified by what he is now, like they just don't even know what to do, is really just really good. So overall, I have to say kudos to James Gunn for this one. I think this is just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, this was fun, and it was. I mean, we did not watch the penultimate episode of Fear the Walking Dead season 6 in favor of this today, so uh, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, me
And we'll
too.
we'll we'll come back to Fear the Walking Dead next time, I guess. Do you have any other parting thoughts about Slither that you want to share?
No, I mean, I'm sorry that I didn't watch it before. I'm sorry that I didn't watch it like when it came out, because I'm now like, but now we got to watch it today, so, or we got to watch it this week, which it was delightful, and it's honestly like a very much on point summer horror comedy. So I think that this is just a fun popcorn movie night if you're into horror films. Like if you're not, this is probably not for you. But this is definitely, I think it's up there with Shaun of the Dead in my book.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of you know, those kinds of like dramedies or comedies or zombies, I guess you would call them. But it's definitely worth a watch. So what did you overall? Were you totally on board?
Yeah,
Did Holly watch this with you? I did not make
no.
Bill watch this with me because I didn't think he could take it.
Yeah, no. I definitely enjoyed it. I watched it in 3 sittings, which was kind of disruptive.
Hmm.
Obviously, I had a busy weekend, so I was trying to fit it in after a day of whatever, and then each time I was just like too tired to finish it. So I watched it on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, which is not a great way to watch anything, but it still had a great impact. But it also meant that I kind of watched it in 3 acts, which is how you're supposed to consume things, I guess, sometimes. But 100% I enjoyed it too. I don't know that I would say that it's in the same ballpark as Shaun of the Dead. I still think that movie just stands apart. But this was enjoyable in similar ways, and I love the cast so much. So I can yeah, I'm happy that we got to do it.
All right. Well, and next time there may be a slight break just because of some travel plans, but we are going to be talking about the last two episodes of Fear the Walking Dead. Hopefully, it will be worth the wait. We'll see.
I wouldn't even say that. Just let's just get it done.
Yeah, so we'll be back as soon as we take a look at those. But if you have any thoughts about Slither, hopefully maybe you took a chance to watch it with us, and if not, please do. But if you have thoughts about it or watched it before, please send us a message, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, reanimatedpcast on the Twitters, or reanimatedpodcast.com is our site, and you could just leave a note there. Any other parting words, Stuart?
Oh, I think you covered it. So I would say thank you all for listening.
Indeed. Ciao.
Bye.